Hello, everybody. Welcome to my podcast about living faith in secular culture. Today, I have a guest from Minneapolis, and he is an artist. He creates film scores and other creative stuff like a puppet theater and things. And I know him from Steiger. It's Phil Shorey. And yeah, welcome to my podcast, Phil.
Hey man, thanks for having me. This is great. I'm happy to be here. Thanks, Simeon.
Yeah, it's really cool to have you on today. The topic normally I'm talking about mostly the topic about in how to live in a secular culture and how you live faith in secular culture. I think for you it will also come up with the I will also come up with the topic of how to use your art in that context and how also to create art that is um, kind of fitting to that context and how to live your faith as an artist and use it also to share the gospel. That would
Hmm.
be the roundabout that we are talking
Mm-hmm.
about today. Um,
Wow.
First, I always want to show my listeners a little bit who am I talking to, like what is the background of the person I'm talking about with. So, especially in the way, are you raised up Christian or secular, or how was your way to Jesus and also to what you do now? So this would be my first question that I always have for my guests.
Yeah. All right. So, yeah. How did I come to Christ, and what was my upbringing like in that? Um, well, it's a great question. I discovered Jesus at a very young age, and I was growing up in a traveling puppet show on the road. My parents were sharing the gospel using puppets and magic and clowns and the arts of all kinds. We're a traveling performance act, and I lived in a camper. Before that, I lived in Alaska. I remember a little bit about that just because it's so dramatic. Uh, and then, but mostly growing up around performance arts and the theater and using that to share the gospel. So I'm actually the fourth generation in my family to use performance arts and circus arts to share the gospel. And I'm writing a book, finishing a book under quarantine. Thank you, COVID. Finishing a book called Travelogues of a Family Sideshow about the 100 years of my family and the five generations of using performance arts to share the gospel. So I discovered Jesus in a really real way. It wasn't just going to church and being a good person or following a bunch of rules or, just religious. It was actually like, trusting God for our next meal, like really trusting God for gas money, like stepping out in faith, uh, 5 nights a week, seeing people at the altar receiving Christ. Um, just, like people really being impacted by the Holy Spirit. And that really impacted me, like this, it was more of a revolution and a movement than just tradition. Um, and I found myself, by the age of 6 in being in these shows, performing, praying with people after shows to receive Christ. I was 6 years old. I was just doing what I saw other people do. I just like that was normal. But I also had like really radical encounters with God at a young age, personal encounters, real ones, spiritual ones, and they were always very loving. Very, very powerful, and I would just find myself crying and just saying, I can feel God's presence around me. It's just so I was a very innocent child as well. I didn't have very many friends because of traveling so much, and I didn't have exposure to a lot of media, and so my world was pretty small in regard to the rest of normal things, and so I felt kind of behind in that. And then when I went into school, I realized, wow, there's a big world out there, way different than what I had discovered as a young kid.
Mm-hmm.
And my journey from that point was discovering that there was religion, and it felt different than what I had experienced as a kid, a lot different. And then there was a culture that I had to understand, continuously trying to understand it, always feeling like I'm a little behind in how it works, just because I started out so like in a bit of a bubble of traveling and no media, and then I discovered, started asking tons of hard questions, and I found that God revealed himself to me in a new way at every stage of my life. So I talk about this a lot in my book. You could, I don't have the radical, like, oh, I was almost gonna like overdose on drugs, and then God saved me, and and I had this radical encounter with Jesus that was, I had all those encounters, but it wasn't like I was being set free from some crazy lifestyle or something. For me, it's been more of a story of God revealing himself to me uniquely at every mental and mature stage of my development, and seeing that progress, and seeing how God speaks to us in ways we can understand as children and as adults, as teenagers, as parents, at every stage. And so I've seen that really manifest in my life. And yeah, so I carry that through, and I pray the best for my kids, that they encounter God at a young age. And it's really like, that's a really crazy story worth telling, like the amazing stories of being delivered and finding Jesus just as you're about to like commit suicide or overdose or something. Those are incredible stories, but a story that I think should be also told is the story of children and families that they grew up in it. They took it for themselves. They discovered Jesus in a radical way, and they're still with it. You know, you know what I mean? Because there's so many other stories of people who just threw it in the pot, and said, that's for my parents. It's not for me. There's a lot of those stories too. So, yeah. So I guess that's roughly how I found Jesus. I would say in high school, I had plans to be a soccer player, and this was like another moment where I took it for myself in a new way. I had plans to be a soccer player. I wanted to be a professional soccer player. I was just so passionate about soccer and loved it so much. Everything about my identity was soccer, believe it or not. And of course, I was a musician as well. I was practicing the piano every day, and I was writing music and stuff. But soccer was where I found my friends, and so that was my identity. And there was one World Cup game where my team lost bad, and I was so mad. I was so angry, and I realized, like, I felt like even then the Holy Spirit spoke to me and said, you're addicted. Like you've got like an idol. It's controlling you. You're not controlling it, you know? And I realized at that moment, like, this identity, this addiction, this obsession, it was going to get between me and God. It was going to ruin me. It was going to change my character. It was going to make me into somebody I didn't want to be. And I gave up my dreams, gave up my plans, gave up my passion at the time. And I said, okay, God, who am I? If I'm not this, who am I? And it kind of sounds silly, just soccer, right? But I mean, it's a fundamental question and a fundamental journey, I think, that everybody goes through, of identity and something controlling them, and them thinking that that's just the way they are, but really, like, when you have a relationship with God, with Jesus, it's not about other things claiming your identity and controlling you. It's about being the best version of Jesus that you can be. So that, that should be first. And then he can use arts and sports and all these other things. So yeah, so that was one moment where I went from, I was in high school, and I went from, just one identity and one dream, one plan, to God's plan, God's dream, in search for God's identity for my life. Yeah.
Oh,
That's
cool.
my a little nutshell
In a nutshell.
how I found Jesus. Yeah.
Cool. And how we were talking about art, and can you maybe describe what kind of art you are doing right now? Maybe the orchestra thing and also the puppet theater. Maybe I will play later in the podcast the one song from the orchestra shortly, so people can understand what it's about. But can you explain a little bit what you do right now, or what is your big
Wow.
projects?
Well, right now things are a little different than what normal is normally, but normally,
Yeah,
I
of
mean,
course.
I'm a composer, missionary kind of guy, I guess. That sounds like kind of a strange combination. I typically say I'm a missionary, or I mean, not minister, but minister and composer, and I join the two together, which is fun, because you don't hear of a lot of composers that are also ministers. In fact, when I'm talking to people who aren't Christians, it opens up a good conversation, because artists, they don't know many artists that are also preaching the gospel. But I mean, I fell in love with film composition in high school, and that was another dream. I wanted to be a film composer, and just really like, I mean, I've grown up playing the piano all my life, and could never find music that I really, really loved. So I wrote my own, and that was the music that I always wrote music, always as a kid, and learned the skill of it all, and went to school for it. And that was my dream, to be a film composer and to work in Hollywood, and I'll do that whole thing. But when I was in school to do that, IPR here in Minneapolis, I went to Brazil. I was working in the theater at the time, and I was a composer in an underground punk rock theater, and they were having me write music for plays and musicals and different things. And they knew I was a Christian, but I have a very distinct sound for creepy music and horror and circus music and stuff. And that was my inroad in this pagan theater. They really loved my music. So even though I was a Christian, they were okay with that, because they really liked the music that I wrote. And so I became close friends with a lot of people, and at the time I also was working with Steiger and this bike club called the Scallywags. We rode freak tall bikes at the time. We rode bikes with other anarchist bike clubs, and it was a blast. It was crazy, but it was authentic, and authentic missions, I guess. And we went down to Brazil, and I brought my show down there during spring break, and I performed my show in orphanages and on street corners with kids sniffing glue. And the show is about Saul's conversion, the idea that a murderer, it has not gone too far from God, for God to change his life and use him in a radical way. And that was the message we brought down there in Portuguese, for a culture known for gangs and drug lords and kids doing crazy things everywhere all the time. And then we brought it into a brothel. We did the show 4 times in a brothel, and got to pray with 40 plus prostitutes and men that were there to do business with prostitutes, and that just changed my life. I mean, I saw God in a really amazing way. Just like when I was a kid, like faith without works is dead. Like if you're not living it, not being the light, you're not going to feel like you're believing in very much.
Mm-hmm.
And so I realized, I always wanted to impact the world, and I realized that maybe a little marionette street theater might have a bigger impact on this world than me trying to pursue the rat race and climb the Hollywood ladder as a composer. And so I forgot my dream again, and
Mm-hmm.
decided to not pursue film composition in any shape or form. Once in a while, a commercial opportunity would come my way, and I would do that, and write something for different things, but never pursuing it as a career, and still not. But I pursued missions. I pursued street theater and marionettes, and that led me all over the world. And that led me to translate my show into over 10 languages, um, and perform in the craziest places you could ever imagine being. And I've seen God bring incredible hope and change, restoration to juvenile jails and Roma camps and institutions, institutionalized orphans. Um, yeah, like heavy things, heavy places. And I've rode this line, this fine line of humanitarian and bringing art and a moment of sanctuary into destitute and fringe places, and not compromising the gospel in the process of that.
Mm-hmm.
It's a lot of people are great at sharing the gospel, and a lot of people are really great at serving the poor. But I've really been tried and felt it's my calling to do both, and to do both really well and together. And I see that that's just what Jesus did. That's exactly what he did. He preached the kingdom of God, and he served the poor simultaneously. Um, and yeah, so I do that with art. I like to say I'm an advocate for healing the human heart, and I see the best way to do that is by storytelling and by art and street theater. And then the crazy thing of it all was that it was this street theater, uh, and just doing this, that led me back to film composition. Of course, you probably know about Slot Art Festival, and I've done a lot of my shows in Poland, performing at Slot Art Festival in Wrocław and Lubjanka, and that introduced me to a lot of people and serving their works, doing workshops and serving their mission, their ministry, and their cause over there. And I developed a comic book, and I fell in love with that film, the German film Nosferatu, and the silent horror film. And I developed this comic book because when I was in film school, I watched Nosferatu and realized this film has an incredible metaphor for the cross and the resurrection, and good versus evil, and self-sacrificial love, and just the resurrection, and like the fall of man, Hutter, and how he pursues his reckless greed. So I saw Nosferatu as in high school, but then in college, and it
Mm-hmm.
brought me to tears, and I was like crying in class. I'm like, wow, like it impacted me. Like I saw it around the same time I saw The Passion of Christ, and it impacted me in the same way. And
Oh.
I realized I need to do something with this story, but I don't know what. And so it sat in the back of my head to do something with this story for over 10 years. And then I went to a show. It was a ensemble 8-piece band performing live music to Nosferatu, which is common. I know of a lot of different groups that have done that. I would do that with my accordion in the backyard and invite friends over to watch the movie with a fire, and perform music with it live with my accordion. so it's a normal thing. It's not like super original. It's not common, but a lot of artists do this. And I saw this band perform it, and I was like, oh, you know what? This band is good, but like, I could tell their worldview of this movie is so different than mine. And like, they didn't really have a strong evil theme for the vampire, and the love theme wasn't really really passionate. And Ellen coming back wasn't really enhanced. So I felt something deep in me say, okay, do something with this film now. And I didn't know what else to do. I just thought, okay, maybe a comic book. And I produced the comic book, and my wife was really upset. She's like, you're a composer. You should be writing music for this film, like not doing a comic book. You're not a comic book guy. And I've always liked comics, but I'm not like a comic book guy. And I pitched this thing. I showed it to Slot, and I said, hey, you guys should translate this into Polish. You like to show a lot of movies at your festival, and you could show Nosferatu. We could hand this out afterwards. And they said, that's a great idea, but it'd be better if there was music. Can you write music for this thing? And then I thought, well, I could, but I don't have an orchestra. And they said, well, we have an orchestra. You can use it. And at that point,
Poland, it's Slot.
yeah. And I'm just like, what? So I from no experience, with no real experience with an orchestra, like working in theater with ensembles, classically trained, but not in orchestral methods. I'm self-taught in orchestral methods. I just was given the opportunity of a lifetime, and go big or go home. So we did it, and I brought in a lot of talented people to make it great. I wrote all the music, but I brought in a lot of talented people to help me check my work, and now we've done it in Poland, in Germany, Minneapolis, a number of times. We have and had opportunities to do it more, Brazil, and once all this COVID stuff is done, we're going to do it again. And there's more films in the pipeline, more films that I can write music for that will have a message and a meaning that would hopefully shake things up, just as Nosferatu has.
And if you guys want to see that whole thing, it's even on YouTube. I will link it in the description, so you can see that whole film score with the movie if you want to see what it is. It's really great. You should watch it.
Yeah, there's the live show on YouTube and just the movie with the music as well.
Yeah, I will link both. Cool. That's really interesting because I've always been also been there when you performed. I think was it the first time you performed it even? Yeah, I think so. On Slot, and it was just like a great atmosphere.
Yeah, you were there. You know, you've been a huge help. It's been awesome having you around, taking photos and video and stuff.
Yeah, but I saw a line in your life, and this is also a little bit about your book you wrote now. Is like this thing of always having to give up some things that are important for you, especially as an artist, and also to sometimes, even if it's on your heart, you know it's not the time yet, or you have to give it to God first, and then He will give it back to you. Is this kind of a line in your life? And how would you say? I think this might be a special thing for artists. This kind of let's say balance between I want to show myself or I want to use my art, and of course, as an artist, you have to do something. You have to use your art, otherwise you will not be happy in your life, I guess. But on the other hand, also giving it up to God and making this the higher priority. How would you encourage also artists to see what is the good way for them?
Yeah, definitely. I have never really thought of it as like a theme in my life of like constantly giving up things and and like, you know, that kind of thing. But I guess it is. I mean, it is the title of my first book, Kill Your Art. So that is sort of what it is. But it's not in a real bad way, you know. It's not in like, it sounds bad, you know, like, oh man, if I follow Jesus, am I gonna have to quit doing the things that I love to do? It's not like that, you know. Like there is a stigma, I don't know, at least in the United States, there was a stigma with art, especially art, and just it so easily engulfing you and like, you know, just consuming you, becoming an idol of some kind. It was an era, I think, in the 70s, where people were a little hesitant to embrace the arts for that reason in the church. And I think it was a little bit of a missed opportunity to really involve the artists and bring that into the church and help them own the church a little more. But at the same time, it's a balance. There's a balance between it, you know, because you're not an artist first. You know, if you're following Jesus, you're a child of God. You know, your identity is a child of God first. You know, a point of life is not to make great art. Like that's great, but the point of life is much deeper and much more eternal than just making a painting. You know, like people, I think they sell themselves short when they get into these existential meanings of life and say, you know, I found great meaning in just the fact that when I die, I'll push up a flower. That's, you know, like, no, like there's way more to life and meaning than just like making a painting or making a thing of music. Because it's not just about impacting a person. It's about, what are you impacting them for? What's the end game of the impact? You know, is it going to bring life to somebody, or is it going to bring hurt or damage? Is it going to help culture, or is it going to hurt the culture? You know, it's not, you know, any kind of impact. If a meteor impacts our world, you know, that could definitely change things up. But is it going to change it for good or for bad? You know, and so I like to submit my art to the authority that is fatherly, loving, caring, beautiful, like passionate, loving authority. You know, you can submit your life to countless authorities, and so many of these authorities are so disguised you don't even know that they're authorities. You know, you can say I'm against all authority, but you're a punk rocker and you're submitting to the authority of punk. You know, it's so secret, it's so disguised. So everybody submits to some kind of voice, some kind of authority. So why not submit to an authority that loves you more than you probably love yourself? You know, why not submit to an authority that has your best interest and the world's best interest, and didn't just talk about it, but proved it on the cross? Gave his life for you and for me. This kind of authority, I think you can trust. So if this kind of authority is loving, I want to follow, I want to create, I want to submit, I want to join, I want to partner, I want to collaborate with this type of artist, this creator of the universe. And then I want to have an impact, you know?
Yeah.
And that's a journey, you know. We're all artists. We're all on a journey, you know. I'm less. I think I'm less on a journey of trying to discover myself, and more on a journey of trying to discover Jesus, and see how that affects me, you know, and discover how Jesus changes me and makes me a better version of me than I can make of myself. And then so submitting my art, submitting my ideas, putting it in the right perspective, the right order of things. I'm a child of God first, and then I'm an artist. I'm a follower of Jesus. I don't want to just impact the world. I want to impact the world in a way that brings hope to the world. I want to impact the world that brings love and peace and joy. And if I think for a second that I am the authority on these things, I am so arrogant, you know. I am so conceited to think that I, for a second, know how to bring hope to this world. I mean, look at it. Look at the world. It's ridiculous. It is just on fire and ridiculous. I'm in Minneapolis. I just saw the firsthand the result of humanity at its finest. You know, just love. Just I mean, there is a lot of good things going on, and people loving each other and serving each other. But when left to our own devices, when allowed to do what is inside, we just want to do it. Oh, it's bad. It's really bad. And I know for a second that I'm not the author of hope and peace and love in this world. Humanity is not. History has repeated itself time and time again, you know. It's not good. But there is one who is. And I want to join with that. And I'm not talking about religion, of course. You know a little bit of my story with my upbringing and how I felt a strong difference as a kid between the traditional legalistic system of religion and the loving power of God changing lives. That there's a difference. So I'm not talking about like join the authority of some religious system. That's another conversation. It starts with, do you trust that God is for you, not against you? And if you do, then how do you know that's true? And if you know that's true through Jesus, by the fact that he displayed it, he didn't just write a book or talk about it, but he like acted it out and did it and continues to do so. Then maybe you can trust him with your art, you know, being the fact that your art is probably the most dear to your heart. And so maybe you can trust him with your heart as well. And then go on that journey of not just self-discovery, but discovery of Jesus, and see what he can do with your art that you can't do, you know, see what he can open up and how he can use you in ways that you could have never imagined. That's how it's been for me. And that's the life that I've just been shocked by, and seeing how God has used my art all over the world. And I'm honored. I'm honored to be able to collaborate with the creator of the universe. I mean, who wouldn't be, right? I mean, people say like, oh man, wouldn't it be great to collaborate with John Williams? Wouldn't it be great to have collaborated with Michelangelo? You know, we have the
Yeah.
opportunity to collaborate with the creator that created everything. Like, who wouldn't want to take us? Who wouldn't want to try that? You know, that's what a privilege, and that privilege isn't just for elites or talented people. That privilege is for every person. It doesn't matter how quality you are or skilled you are at your craft. We all have the opportunity to collaborate with the creator that surpasses Michelangelo and Bach and everybody, Mozart, you know, Beethoven, everybody. So that's cool. That's what I want to do. That's what I try to do.
Wow, very cool. To go also back to the topic of the connection to secular culture, you shared that you worked also a lot in theaters and had contact to like that's I guess very non-Christian or even like people that are really against like religion or faith and stuff like that. And also your theme about the Nosferatu, you found something of Jesus in a very secular piece of work, which is not itself, you couldn't say Nosferatu is inspired by God or something. It's just this very secular work, and you still found like a, a message of the cross in it. So how do you think this this coexistence that you were in the culture, also in the theater maybe, and that you had influences from that secular culture, also made you think of your faith maybe in a different way, or even made you look more for these kind of things that are already in the culture and that you can use for presenting Christ to people? That was a
Yeah.
lot of questions. Sorry.
Well, no, I think I get your question.
Yeah.
It's very simple. I mean, we are reflections. You know, I think there's very little that we produce that is completely original. You know, like we are very much reflections. I believe like that we reflect the creator of the universe, you know, in the fact that we create. We're made in his image, and we are unique in nature for that. So if we're reflections and we are kind of filters, you know, things come in and we filter it out through what we are, and we are you know, if we are made up of Jesus, then things are going to be filtered out in a way that reflect and enhance that narrative and that story. If we are filled with something else, if our filter is other things, humanism or some other worldview, then what we see and perceive will oftentimes be filtered out through that lens as well. And this isn't, I don't think I'm speaking anything radical by saying this. It's just science, probably, you know, like Jesus did the exact same thing, you know, in John 15, he's walking through a vineyard and he's talking about the vine, you know, I am the vine, you are the branches. There's something around him. He sees it and he pulls it into his story, uses it as a metaphor, and teaches a profound concept of God through what he just saw. So I'm an artist, and so I see a lot of movies and I see a lot of things, but I'm also a follower of Jesus. So naturally, things are going to get filtered through that lens when it comes out. And I do have to be careful of what I watch, and some things don't sit well with me, and some things, you know, I've learned how to listen to certain things, you know, in a different way where it doesn't impact my spirit, but sometimes I just can't listen to it. It's just not right. And so, you know, like with Nosferatu, you know, like I'm in the scene, I'm watching movies, and I'm in film school. I'm into, like, at that time I was I was following the Lord, but I was also searching like vampire folklore and just trying to get to the bottom of certain questions that I had. And I did go through a bit of a vampire phase in high school as well, as a lot of people did. But like if we're just looking at Christian art, if we're just looking at Christian media all the time, then it's kind of like, I think it's kind of like a bubble that's circulating in the bubble, and it's like more bubbles are being made within the bubble,
Mm-hmm.
And it starts to look kind of self-infused or the same things. It's nothing cutting edge anymore, like we're just sort of being inbred a little bit. And I think a lot of the church art and a lot of church it does all look the same. It does look very inbred and kind of, cliche. It becomes cliche and boring. And I think it's because it's just sort of like in its own culture and kind of not progressing. It's just stagnant. And I'm not just saying that to like bash Christian art or Christian artists or anything. I've seen that happen in anarchist art as well. The theater that I was composing music for, everything was all about like fire, being naked, and beer. Like it was just it was just a lot of the same stuff. Let's protest the war and let's do this. And so it was just a lot of the same stuff. And I thought, like, man, you guys are just preaching to the choir. Like you're not even inclusive to other people's beliefs. Like you say you're tolerant, but you're really not. And I see a lot of that with Christian art as well. So any scene, any culture, I think, can become very cliche and very inbred. It takes a lot of work and humility and sacrifice and just work, thick skin even, to step outside of your culture and step outside of your comfort zone and explore other ideas and explore other ways of expression, and that's not normal. But when you do, you open up your eyes and mind to how other people are thinking and where they're coming from, and you see the world in a much bigger way. I would not suggest as a believer you do that passively. I would suggest you do that missionally, actively, intentionally. Otherwise, as I've seen it before, that bubble can become very enticing and seductive and suck you in. And you'll forget why you went there in the first place. But if you're healthy and accountable and not alone in it, then I would highly suggest you get outside your bubble and you explore other forms of art, other forms of communication, other ideas, and then let the Holy Spirit speak to you and inspire you and show you how you can use that to present a better message, a good message of hope and salvation and love and joy that the world really is looking for. So that, I don't know if that answers your question, but that's my thought on that.
Yeah, maybe to add to this, it's probably also not that you have to make yourself search for these narratives that talk about the gospel or about something out of the of your spiritual life or something. It's more like when you see things, then the Holy Spirit will touch you. Like you said with Nosferatu, you didn't search for a film that represents the gospel. You just saw it and you felt like this is exactly what I'm feeling and what I see Jesus in. So I think this is maybe this inspirational approach to it, like to really get out there and really open yourself up and then see for yourself which things are resonating with you, and also to see which things maybe are bad for you and you stop watching those things. But you will also always find a little bit of Jesus in a lot of things that are not Christian. I find a lot of Jesus in like a lot of secular songs, or even if it's not about Jesus or the gospel, you can find a lot of songs that resonate the heart of a culture, for example, and that you can really feel with, oh, this is how people feel in my environment. This is really what people have in their hearts, and this is also a really important thing to represent to them. Maybe a different theme, like these songs about feeling empty and stuff like this, or there's a lot of things in the culture, and if you don't know this, you cannot represent another theme, or you cannot interact with this. But if you know it, then you can, in a way, creatively maybe, which is very possible nowadays with like podcasts like this, or art that reflects some other things, or maybe even songs that reflect on a song that you've heard from some secular artists. That there's a lot of different possibilities, I think, to interact. Also, not just to be different than the culture. Of course, we are different, but also to interact with the culture around us and the people around us. And also that's something maybe you can share really shortly. That's also what you do in the Nosferatu orchestra thing. Yeah, it's your focus is not only the music, not only to have a good show. You also have had the focus, because there's not only Christian artists playing with you, to also represent them your view of that film and of the gospel in not only the audience but also the people you work with, right?
Yeah, the orchestras are normally mixed, believers, non-believers working together. It's a bit of a workshop, and people get into it for a lot of different reasons. I think some of them get into it for the community aspect, that it's just a fun environment. It's exciting. It's to put on a big show, to learn about film composition and to perform in a large number. I mean, it's an incredible opportunity for anybody to work with so many musicians and see how it can all fit together. And then other people, it's an amazing opportunity to use their art to share the gospel in a real practical kind of way, and just be a part of it, and just see how this is one method, one model that can work, and to just watch that, and then there's others that are just straight up into the ministry of it. Like they want to pray with people, they want to see God move, they want to, and it's just like yes, they're really passionate about the behind the scenes, and then like right in front at the end of the show. So at different levels, there's different types of people and all walks of life and all beliefs, all coming together, working together, and the fact that music can be such a common ground, common interest, having a good time and community and building these friendships. And then for myself, just able to set the tone and the culture of inclusion, while sharing the fact that this film inspired me towards a loving God, and towards the message of Jesus and what he did here on earth, and so blending those two together of like including all people of all walks of life, and showing them who Jesus is. I think that's not a common opportunity, not a common place. At least here in Minneapolis, things are pretty divided, and it is hard here in Minneapolis to find people who want to do it and are just different walks of life. People, things have become very polarized. So it is very wonderful when we get a mixed group of people and we can come together on the foundation of music and film composition, and then bring a message to an audience that is just full of life and hope and positivity, and I mean, our world needs to hear that kind of message. So many different levels of cool stuff happening in our orchestra. I love it. I miss it. We were supposed to do a number of shows, and I'm still not sure if we can do something this October or not. But It's on pause, but it's not over. We have our Instagram. We're trying to build that. Curse of the Vampire Orchestra on Instagram and Facebook. And yeah, so check that out if you can tell your followers, you know, follow us on Instagram. So when we start up again, you'll know about it.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, maybe I have one last question that I always ask my guests that are coming, and this is how would you inspire or encourage young people, maybe artists, maybe people that are on also people that maybe don't know what to do yet, are on their search for how to serve God with their art and how to find their way. How would you encourage them to like go ahead and step ahead in their journey?
I would just say fall in love with Jesus, you know, get a broken heart for the lost. That's where it all starts, you know. A lot of people have come out of different things and their art means stuff that they don't like when they find Jesus, you know. Like I know a number of painters and dancers that they found Jesus and they're like, I can't paint anymore. Like everything I painted just reflects paganism, you know, or some, you know, I can't dance anymore. Everything I've done dance wise has always been very sexual, and I can't, you know, I just don't feel right about it anymore. You know, it's the same thing with anybody. Like just fall in love with Jesus. You know, he loves you. He wired you a certain way. He gave you these gifts. He wants you to use them, but in the right way. You know, we got to think less about, I think, our self-expression and more about expressing the creator and making him famous instead of making ourselves famous. So it's a journey, but I would just start with falling in love with Christ, asking him, find a prayer closet. My prayer closet was my bike. I would get on my bicycle and I would just ride and I would pray and I would cry on my bicycle and I'd just fall in love. And I was scared. Mostly I was scared because I didn't know where my art was going to take me, and I knew for sure I wasn't ready. I don't have a degree in cross-cultural studies. You know, I don't know a lot of languages. At the time, I had no real teaching in theology. You know, I had a singular message because that's the only thing I really knew. It was Jesus, that he died on the cross and he loved me because of it. And you know, and so I just started there, but that caused me to have more of a desperate heart for the Holy Spirit to work in my life, because without it, I was in trouble. And so I would challenge artists to get your priorities right. You know, at the end of the day, it's not going to be how many paintings did you make. It was that one painting maybe that was done out of obedience that had the biggest eternal impact. And you'll see the fruit of that beyond, you know, beyond the shallow applause of the moment. You know, that's what I'm looking for, is greater fruit and greater success than just a momentary applause.
Cool. Yeah, thank you for these last words. It was really cool to have you on the podcast. It was we could have gone on for way longer. I tried to cover a little bit everything that you do. Maybe we should do another one soon again to get more specific into some topics, because I think you have a lot to say, especially for artists and people that are on this way. Yeah.
Yeah, man, totally. Well, thanks for having me. This has been fun.